Good morning, everyone. This is Paula Newcomb, and I'm the Northeast Regional Coordinator from the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office. Today I am at the Allen County Public Library, and I'll be the host and question moderator for today's webinar, Tips and Tricks for Hosting Large-Scale Community-Driven Events. Welcome, everyone, and very glad that you could join us today. I see a lot of familiar names out there. And also thanks so much to Michelle Merritt for presenting today. She is the trainer at the Allen County Public Library. So before we begin, I just want to start off with a few housekeeping items and announcements. To register for other trainings available from the Professional Development Office, please check out the Indiana State Library's events calendar, which can be found at our website at www.in.gov/library. The Indiana State Library has many ways that we try to stay connected to library staff across the state. For weekly updates on upcoming trainings and to learn more about what's happening in libraries across the state, please subscribe to our weekly e-newsletter, The Wednesday Word. Now, sound issues. If you have any sound issues during the webinar, please see the sound issues box just below the chat box on the left side of the screen. If there is a global sound issue, we will announce it in the chat box. If you are unable to resolve the sound issues that you're experiencing, please know that we are recording the webinar and you can watch it offline after the webinar is over. This webinar will also be available on our archived webinars page after it's been uploaded to YouTube and transcribed. So again, if there's a sound issue or a global sound issue, we will make an announcement in the chat box. LEUs, your LEU will be available for download at the end of the webinar. We'll have that document available for you to download, so make sure you are signed on until the end of the presentation to get your LEU. This session is 1 hour, so you'll get one LEU. If you're not able to download it, I will follow up with an email and check with you to see if you received it. And questions. If you have a question, just type it in the chat box on the upper left side of the screen, and we'll get to your question answered as soon as there's a good opportunity, and there should also be a time near the end for questions. So now I will turn over the mic to Michelle, and we'll get her presentation.
Perfect. Well, welcome to Tips and Tricks for Hosting Large Community-Driven Events. I am Michelle Merritt. I am the trainer here at the Allen County Public Library. I am the Staff Day and Customer Service Team Leader here at ACPL. I am also a member of the HR team. I'm a wife and a proud United States Marine recruit mom, as well as a classic oldest child, which means I probably have the right personality to drive big community events, but and an Ina Gardner wannabe for sure. So a little bit about me, but more importantly, let's get to the event. Or the webinar today. So let's talk about what to expect in the next 45 minutes or so. We're going to talk about what a community-driven event really is, how it differs from maybe something you're already doing in your programming, why we host them, who attends, where and when to do them, and then some practical tips, tricks, and pitfalls to avoid. I've done a lot of these over the years, and there are a lot of things that I've learned and some stumbles I've taken that hopefully I'm going to share with you, and you'll be able to avoid them for yourselves in the future. So, first and foremost, what is a large-scale community-driven event? This looks like your standard author visit. This is an event we did in March here at ACPL. Forrest Pritchard is considered one of the fathers of the farm-to-table movement. He lives in the Washington, D.C. area. And we got a call one day that Mr. Pritchard was going to be in the area, and would we want to do an author visit with him and have him give a lecture? Absolutely, we'd love to. They offered us a pretty good price, and we were happy to accommodate him since he was already coming through town. That said, we got to thinking about what we could do to make it bigger than just your standard author visit. So we started talking about the farm-to-table movement that is really taking off in Fort Wayne. The foodie movement is really beginning to bud here in Fort Wayne, and we have 5 or 6 restaurants locally, all locally owned here in Allen County, and our library does cover the entire county, and that are really embrace the farm-to-table movement, organic food, and the philosophies that Mr. Pritchard is very proud of and lives by himself. So we reached back out to his people and said, what if we did a tasting prior to the event? Would you be up for that? Would you be up for participating in something a little bit bigger? He was very eager and very willing to participate in any sort of additional event that profiled area farmers, area restaurants that were supporting farmers, and anything that met or matched his cause. So we then began to reach out to area restaurants and ask them if they would be interested in participating. At that point, we invited locally owned farm-to-table restaurants. We ended up with a couple local farms as well. We partnered with our large farmers market and invited everybody here to do a tasting. So when we say large-scale community event, we had approximately 250-ish people attend. The event was free to the public. That's a choice that we've made in our library to not charge people for events unless we absolutely have to. And the event was really driven by the partnerships within the community. Mr. Pritchard really, while a draw to many people, was only one piece of the puzzle. The community and the restaurant owners, that sort of thing, they were the ones who really drove traffic to this event. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. So large-scale community events, that's an example of one, but are things where we really bring in the community and our network of resources within our own community to help host an event on a bigger scale. So why host large-scale community events? I love this slide because, love your neighbor, right? We want to be here at ACPL, as many of you do, the go-to place in your community, the cornerstone in your community. And so by doing that, hosting these events, we bring people together here at our library. We choose as much as possible to host these things here at the library, and we'll talk about where and when type issues in a minute. But most importantly, we know that we want to bring people together so that more people become aware of the library as a community service. And that's our big reason behind it. So who attends? Well, the whole world attends. We want everyone to attend. We don't limit. Now in cases like the farm to table taste, we had to limit registration because as much as I enjoy meeting the fire marshal when he comes to visit, when we're at maximum capacity, I know that our event people don't necessarily like that. So we make a point to ask for reservations in advance of the event, and we will do everything in our power to have a check-in list. Now, reservation is free, but again, you can, this way we know who's planning to attend. And we reward people who follow us on Facebook and check out our website and things like that by allowing them to register in advance and guaranteeing them a seat. So at that point, our events are open to just about everyone. We build community that way, whether that's, in the case of the Farm to Table Taste, it was everyone from area farmers in Allen County who were truly interested in what Mr. Pritchard was doing as a business owner, to local authors who cared about how he published his book, to people who just really were big fans of some pretty fancy restaurants that maybe they couldn't afford. And so the idea to get a free sample of a really fancy restaurant was a great thing for them. So we had a huge variety of people there that night, and all of our large-scale community events tend to bring in a vast variety of people. Okay, so where and when? I love this. I don't know if this slide is a bookstore in Argentina or if it's a theater that's been turned into a library, but either way, how cool would this be to be able to turn a big old theater like this into a library? But we have the ability to host events here in our building, and whenever we can, we try to host events in our building. So for us, sometimes we have to get creative. We do have a theater here, but we also have a lobby. So for the taste, the vendors were all set up around the edge, and then everybody else mingled in. So you got to see people you don't normally see. Everybody mingled. There were high top tables. We really, again, encourage this community sort of involvement. Get creative with your space. But if you can host it in your library, even if lots of other people are involved, you still get a lot of credit that way. And it's great to sort of encourage people to come to your space. So as far as when to hold community events, it's funny. I polled all of my friends who are event planners and asked them what some of their tips were. And the first thing they all said was check your community calendars for other events going on. Many of you live in communities much like Fort Wayne where people are very charitable. So there are a lot of various events happening in your communities at the same time. Double check community calendars, whether that's from your local newspaper, your visitors bureau, maybe your public library shares that, your Chamber of Commerce. There are lots of places that share community calendars. Make sure that you're not coming up against an event that is already really attractive to who might be your target audience. So you can host them any time of year, but again, keep those things in mind. Here in Northeast Indiana, during the summer, everyone goes to the lake on Thursday night or Friday. So we don't host events on Thursday nights in the summer because no one comes. But that's because we live near a lot of lakes and people going away for the weekend. Know what your community is about. If you lived in or near Indianapolis, you probably want to stay away from the month of May because, especially as you get closer to Memorial Day because of race season and all the events going on around the race. So whatever your community is known for, make sure you accommodate for that or allow for that when you're scheduling your event. Okay, so let's get to the nitty-gritty of tips and tricks and pitfalls to try to avoid here. So ask yourself, why do you want to do this? It's common that a group of people will get together and say, let's host something. Let's bring people in. We need more attention. We need the community to know we're here. Let's host something. Well, that's great. And you want to bring the people in, but why? Ask yourselves why you're doing it. Are you doing it because you want to profile a remodeled department? Do you want to showcase part of a new collection you have? Do you want to be known in the community for a certain program and you want to build on that? Is it summer learning and you want to do a big kickoff event? What's your why? And once you can identify your why, it will help you move forward. But have a real honest conversation with one another about your motives in hosting an event. Any kind of event, but especially a large-scale community event, because when you start to reach out to those partners within the community, what's going to happen is they're going to say, why are you doing this? And why should I be involved? And you have to know for sure your reason before you can share it with someone else. I love this. So start with the end in mind. Now, ask yourself, if I am skipping down the street at the end of this event, the event's done, everything's cleaned up and put away, all of that. I'm going home that night and I am skipping down the street like this guy. What has just happened? What does success look like? So you know why you want to do something. Now ask yourself, what does success look like? So we sort of begin with the end in mind. What does success in a large-scale event look like for you? Does it mean that new people who have never been to your library have come? Does it mean that you've courted some potential donors who might want to get involved in your friends group or something like that? It really could mean just about anything, but what we want to make sure of is that we understand in advance from the very beginning what success will look like so that you can then drive your event to that point of success. Okay, and you want to make sure that not only you know that, but everybody on your team knows that, so that everybody is shooting for the same common goal. So ask yourself, who cares? You want to host an event. You know what it's going to look like when it's successful, but who's going to care? And why should you care? That's how you start to determine who your partners are. In the case of our farm to table taste, when I asked myself what does a successful community event look like for us in this regard, I had hosted tastes in the past, so I was familiar with the type of event and knew exactly who would care. Who cared about Mr. Pritchard's cause? Well, it was our farmers. It was our restaurant owners who specialized in farm to table. It was our farmers market folks, etc. So I was able to then begin to identify who the community partners would be and who I needed to go ask for help. Build your team. Ask yourself who cares? So internally and externally, who needs to be involved, and ask those people to be on your team. Now, you don't want a committee so large that you lose track of them, but having members of your team internally as well as externally that are involved and invested in this will make a difference. Make sure you include, if this is truly a community event, make sure you're including people from the community in the planning process. There were two area restaurant owners that one was a restaurant owner, one led the farmers market here for the event that we're using as the example today, that really became involved and met with me regularly, and we made sure that their needs were met, and they represented in many ways the interest of the people who were from the community that were getting involved, which was incredibly important. So build your team strategically and know who's going to care and ask those people to step up and get involved. Set a timeline. Now, again, we work backward with the beginning in mind. So for us, and I'm sorry, I looked for one of my old timelines to see if I could find one for you today. And it's really hard to fit it all on one screen. But set your event date after you've checked calendars. You know that there's nothing competing with it either within your own organization or out in the community. And work backwards from anywhere from 12 months to 18 months out. When you're talking about an event with several hundred people, really plan as far out in advance as you can. Many of you, I think, sat in on the staff day webinar we did a couple weeks ago, and that's one of the things we talked about. We plan that event a year out. The same is true with large-scale community events. You want to begin the planning process as far in advance as possible. So again, if your event happens on September 1st, you begin asking yourself, okay, on September 1st, this happens. On the day before, what else is happening? And work backward. The week before, the month before, etc. And start to build your timeline of everything from when vendors need to be contacted to when to promote the event, social media calendars, all of those things. Build one massive timeline, which ultimately becomes your to-do list for this event. And you can then share the duties with all of your committee members so that not one person is taking it all on. Build up your proposal. So as you start to go out to your community and ask for help and involvement, know what it is you're asking for. Don't just freely go and say, hey, would you like to be involved? And then not really have a plan as to what it's all going to look like. Be able to demonstrate to a community partner why they should be involved with your library, why they should be involved with this event, why it will benefit them. And that's the approach you always want to take. How would this benefit the community partner? Not how it benefits your library, not how it benefits your individual customer coming in off the street, but how does it impact that community partner? because there's going to be work involved for them, and likely it's going to be work they're donating. Great example. We hosted an event here, we meaning a board I was on, not the library. I chaired an event here called Walk a Mile in Her Shoes. Many of you may know Walk a Mile in Her Shoes as the mile race where men wear 4-inch red high heels and race to raise money toward rape counseling and sexual assault intervention, things like this. It's a great event, and we've had incredible success here in Fort Wayne with it. The year that I chaired it, we decided we were going to set the Guinness record for the largest high heel race in the world. Setting a Guinness record is not inexpensive. So we did a little research, and what we learned was that the people who own the Guinness World Records also own Guinness beer. And the logical conclusion for us was that we would go to the local Irish pub and ask the person who serves the most Guinness beer in Fort Wayne if they would be our Guinness World Record sponsor. And we then began to build a partnership with them around something that mattered to them, that made sense to them, that they could get behind a great cause, put their name to a product that made sense and fit their business model. And they wrote us a very large check right away. So I recognize some of you can't take sponsorship and things like that, but that's an example of how you build those relationships. Think strategically about what will matter to the person you're inviting to the table, not what just benefits your library. Advertise. Now, you probably can't take out a digital billboard in Times Square, but you can begin sharing the information. And again, build this into your timeline so that you know in advance exactly what date and what medium you're using to advertise. So if that's going in your newsletters, if that's utilizing social media, if that's putting out posters in your branches, whatever your means of advertising is, make sure that you're getting the word out. Sending out press releases to local newspapers. You know, on slow news days, they can really pick up some great local pieces. Or if you already have a great relationship with your local media, begin reaching out to them to let them know about this event. Encourage media coverage as often as you can, but make sure you're well organized and prepared with the information so that the right information is getting out as soon as possible. And again, over communicate, I would suggest, as much as possible. So communicate. Definitely over communicate your event, over communicate with your committee, over communicate with your internal partners as well as your external partners, over communicate with your customer. You want to make sure that all of the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, that every single detail is out there and that people are well aware of what your expectations are, what they can expect from you, etc. And communicate in a variety of ways. Not everybody checks their email. Make sure you call people when necessary. Not everyone takes phone calls. You may have vendors that only text you or community partners who only will text you. That's okay. Don't get frustrated by that. Instead, work within how they communicate, and again, continue to communicate over and over. It won't necessarily prevent something bad from happening, but you can, with a clear conscience, know that you communicated all of the information and did everything you could for the event to go smoothly. Some additional tips. Begin planning 13 months in advance. I can't stress this enough. We talked about this a minute ago, but I'll go back to it again. 13 months seems like a long time, but you need more than a year for many, many events. Now, in the case of our Farm to Table Taste, we put that together in, I think, 70 days because we got word that he was coming and said yes and went for it. Keep in mind that I have been organizing events like this for about 15 or 20 years. So if you're experienced with these sort of things, you can put it together quickly, but even then, that's not ideal. You want to make sure that you are really giving yourself and your committee members and your community members enough time to cross every T and dot every I. Triple check your community calendars. I also can't express that enough. We certainly want to be sure that we are not competing with our fellow, community members. We don't want to step on the toes of another large event, and we also don't want to distract from members of the community who could be our partners in the future. So do everything you can. That does not mean you won't end up crossing calendars with someone. That will likely happen if you have a very active community. But you can at least say that you checked as many things as you can. And if you happen to know that a certain event happens each year around the time that you're thinking of hosting your event, pick up the phone and call that group and ask them, have you set a formal date yet? We're looking at doing something and we don't want to cross calendars. So that's an important one. Expect the unexpected. I think that's super important too. You can't know what you don't know, and something's going to happen. And that's okay. That's okay. The best piece of advice I've probably heard in a long time from an event planner recently said, if something goes wrong, chances are you and your committee are the only people who know that it was supposed to be different. So just go with it. Relax, just go with it. Don't stress out. Do everything you can to roll with the punches. So your guests will only panic when you panic. So if something happens, if the technology goes bad, that seems to be the thing that always seems to happen the most. And it doesn't matter how many times you check and recheck someone's presentation. That's okay. People are incredibly forgiving at these things. There might be one or two people who aren't, but most people are incredibly forgiving at these sort of events. So do your best to do that. I was at an event just last night where a charity fundraiser where it was a karaoke event, and halfway through two people's songs, the internet in the building went down. They could have never foreseen that. And luckily, both performers were more than willing to sing a cappella, and everybody had a great time, and it was a lot of fun. But everybody had to roll with the punches. And I don't think anyone in that room thought it was a poorly run event just because the internet went down. So expect the unexpected wherever you can. Also, make sure, this one's not on the slide, and I realize I've missed adding this, but check with your local authorities. Know the rules. Check with the health department if you're hosting a taste event. Check with your local fire marshal if you're worried about fire capacity or in a building. Things like that. I joke about always loving to meet the fire marshal because it means we have a big event and great attendance. But, it should be told, those guys don't want to be coming to your event every time. Your fire marshal may not want to spend her time doing something like that. So, and coming to your event every time to slap your hand. So make sure you understand the rules. And then finally, remember that you're the one ultimately responsible. Hosting large-scale community events often means that your community partners get more glory than you do. You want to make sure that these events make your community partners look really good, because that's going to make them want to come back. But that means that you're going to do a lot of the problem solving, handle all of the headaches, listen to everyone complain behind the scenes, put a smile on your face, and go right out there while everyone talks about what a great job your community partners did. But what they'll also always remember when they talk about your event was that it was at your library. And so therefore, in their mind, they will always associate that great event with your library. So remember that you're the one that's responsible. You are the one, when you're hosting this event, you and your organization are the ones doing the hard work. But at the end, I think it's often worth it. So I think that at least covers the slides. And I talked really fast today, I think. But I'm sure there are some questions and comments and everything else. So tell me what I can answer for you, ideas you want to share, anything like that.
We have a question. Do you have any thoughts on building an audience for a new program?
Absolutely. I have thoughts on everything. No, in all honesty, I think you ask yourself what your program is. So, who cares about your program? Who cares about this? Why are you doing it? If you're doing it, hopefully there's a reason, not just because you feel like you've got to get so many programs in a year, but more importantly, you're doing it to benefit a group of people. So where are those people? Where do they go? Where do they shop? Are they online? How do they get their information? And then start to ask yourself, okay, who's responsible for getting that information? And then start reaching out in those fashions. So for example, today you might use Facebook to reach baby boomers, but you might not necessarily use Facebook to reach teenagers anymore. So ask yourself, if boomers are your target market, then you're probably going to Facebook. Can you run a quick Facebook ad that's inexpensive? Something like that. Twitter, if it's something to do with politics, obviously Twitter is the hotbed for politics. So that's an area where you're going to target an audience there, things like that.
And she also said, suppose it's a good thing to think about the why and if it fills a need.
Absolutely. I think you do have to always ask yourself why you're doing it. And again, the answer should not be, in my opinion, just to benefit the library. If that's the case, the event's going to fail. When we hosted Walk a Mile in Her Shoes, we did it so that we could raise money for the REACT program, which is the rape counseling program here in Fort Wayne, and then ultimately to get the word out about what it means to be a responsible member of our community men standing up for sexual assault. So we did it for a bigger reason than just raising money.
How do you handle a vendor or community organization that will not return your calls or emails while you are eliciting community partnerships?
I move on. That's the answer to that question. So we had that happen with our taste. It was a very high-profile restaurant here in Fort Wayne that would not return our calls. I Facebooked them. I left them voicemails. I emailed what I thought were the right numbers. These were all people I know through other people. I know the owners, so I could not seem to get their attention. So instead, we went to their competition and started asking everyone else who was in direct competition with them. And then a couple days before the event, they complained to someone that they weren't involved. And we were full. There was no way we had capacity for another vendor at that point. So, move to the next vendor. If someone isn't being responsive, just move on. It's not likely not personal. There's something going on behind the scenes probably, and that's okay.
Okay, any other questions? Or also, if you have something that worked at your library, what are good things that you've done? I mentioned the mini golf when I was at Crown Point. They turned the whole library into a mini golf course. And it was an event, it was a fundraising event. So any other thoughts? Oh, here we go. I'm working on a budget getting Lori LeBay from Alzheimer's speaks to our library in March. Much of the budget is getting eaten up by her costs.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, in the case of the Farm to Table Taste, Mr. Pritchard was hands down the most expensive piece of that event. So ask yourself who's willing to volunteer their time to get involved. If you're having a speaker that is focused on Alzheimer's, are there opportunities to bring in other vendors who might do essentially a senior fair or something surrounding your audience that really cares about Alzheimer's? Maybe that's baby boomers who are caring for their senior parents, things like that. Ask yourself, who would get involved? And most people understand when you approach them as your public library that you're probably not paying them. And the people who don't understand that are often the ones who you say, we would love to work with you, and we don't want to insult you. So by all means, we're going to move on to another potential partner. But yeah, absolutely. There's typically one area that eats up a big part of your budget, And especially if you're having a speaker, it's typically that. The other thing that I want to make sure I throw in here that I realize I haven't, when you're identifying who should be on your committee, ask yourself who the person is that's the most connected person you know. Who is that person that knows everybody, right? I was asked to the table last night for another event because I do tend to know a lot of people in town. That's all great, but they're inviting me to participate in their event because they know that I'm going to utilize some of my connections to help them build a good event. People who are well connected in the community expect that they realize ahead of time that you're asking them for that reason. But again, be sure you can identify your why and why it makes sense for them to care about that. If you are presenting them with an opportunity that has absolutely nothing to do with anything they care about, that might not be the right person. There are other people that are well connected in your community, but always make sure that your committee is full of people who are really connected, or at least one or two people that are really connected to your community, because they can make a lot of these asks that help you with your budget.
I skipped one. Any tips on author programs specifically?
We've done a couple of them here recently that were pretty big. Again, prepare for the unexpected. Make sure that you outline your expectations. Your expectations are a two-way street. Oftentimes we get contracts from authors that may say, I need X, Y, and Z. Make sure that you're communicating back with them your event schedule, what your expectations are, etc. Ask them to get involved. Ask them what they're willing to do. Are they willing to do extra? Again, Mr. Pritchard was up for everything. He spoke to the media throughout the day. Our local NPR station came, all kinds of things like that. So he did interviews all day. That helped our attendance that night. All that sort of fun stuff. So I think he did a phone interview before he even got into town, because it helps them promote their books too. So always ask yourself, who else can we involve that ultimately will help promote that author, and frame the extra things you're asking of them in that vein. I think we can help you get more attention by, introducing you to our local newspaper, etc.
I guess she was thinking more of smaller authors and developing audiences for an author who might not be as well known.
That makes sense. The thing that I would add to that then is ask yourself, again, who cares about the topic? And really start to reach out to the groups that care about the topic. So if it's Alzheimer's, where are your groups that do Alzheimer's research, that are care groups, that might be senior homes, that might be memory care, etc. So ask, if it's something to do with teens, if it's, something about, say, addiction or the opioid crisis, who are your law enforcement professionals, who are families, who are the groups that are involved in that. Whatever your topic may be, ask yourself who cares and start to reach out to those groups as specific partnerships.
I put in there, maybe think about having a local author night, having different tables set up so then your audience can go to the different authors. Maybe they'll learn something new about the local authors that maybe just one local author may not get a big showing for. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Right. Put a few together. I think that's a great avenue. We do an author fair here every year. We do it on a Saturday, where local authors showcase their work, but then also there are sessions throughout the afternoon, 45-minute sessions on how to self-publish or how to write 50,000 words in 30 days, that sort of thing. So you could do some education around with it.
Nice. We've got another person typing. Yeah, anybody else have any ideas that worked at your libraries? Oh, Suzanne says, I might pick your brain about that, about the author fair.
Awesome. We're happy to help. I did not organize that event, but I'm happy to introduce you to the people who do.
Okay, I think it's Friday and we're all tired. Maybe that's the problem. And it was just after ILF. What's a basic timeline you use?
Okay, so here's what I know. I know that, again, we start with the end in mind. We then build backwards. So, and I write down everything. I am incredibly detailed with the timeline. So I have the date of my event, and I literally start with the date of my event, cleanup, meaning it's done, it's over, we're packing up, right? And who's responsible. I go back to, hosting the event, who's going to be there, getting the speaker to the podium, who's responsible for that person. Anything like that, and every single minute detail. And I go back all the way through and start talking about things like, okay, who's making sure if it's an author visit, who is making sure that the hotel is booked, who's picking him up from the airport, how is he getting there, what time is she arriving, any of those sort of details. And then we start also adding in things like email communication, social media posts, dates and times for each of those. So that, and then what I do, we use Outlook. So then everybody on the committee then gets an Outlook appointment, being reminded of what that day's event should look like, what those communications or specific pieces leading up to the event look like. It sounds a little over the top, but nobody misses deadlines this way. And we make sure that everybody gets every piece of it. And again, by using Outlook for us, or even if you use Google Calendar, but sharing your appointments this way and doing them as appointments, everybody will get that timeline and know who's responsible. That help?
Yeah, and she mentioned earlier to me Outlook calendars as well, sharing things that way, or share your calendars. That's really a nice way to keep everybody involved in knowing what's going on, as well as or Google calendars.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, anybody else with any comments? We've got about 15 more minutes if we've got comments, ideas. Again, I know it's a quiet morning, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go ahead and put that LEU up so that if you guys want to go ahead and start trying to download that, you can do that. And also, we'll stay on here and wait for more questions. We've got one person. Oh, no, a few people are typing now. Let's see what we've got. Karen says, I got together with community partners and started community conversations, and we are doing presentations on health.
That's awesome. I think that's a great way to begin this process, and you can really start to identify who can be of help for future events too, and get a feel for what they're passionate about. That's great. I think the other thing that's important too is making sure you approach your community partners from a standpoint that you want to help, not that you want to steal their thunder, so to speak. You want to make sure that you're helping and doing it as a helpful member of the community. Because sometimes, especially if you're working with area nonprofits, things like that, in some communities, ours I know is this way, it can be a bit territorial. And so you want to make sure that they don't feel like you're trying to steal any of their thunder too. How far in advance do you send out press releases or information to the press? It depends on the event. So if I have a large scale event that we're taking registration for, I'm probably announcing the event, then like a week or so before registration opens, I'm sending a press release saying that registration is about to open. And again, I'm including all the information about the event in it. Throughout the timeline, I may be sending multiple press releases, sharing different pieces of the event, but always sharing the overall information of the event. I've been known to even send out a press release saying we've sold out before, just because the more information you get out there in front of the media, the better. So I'm never afraid to send a press release. They're easy to do. I tend to send them on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. It seems to be some of the slowest news time. You don't want to send them. Know when your local paper goes to press. So if your local paper has a 3 p.m. deadline, you know you want to get something in the morning. If you have an evening paper, you know you have to get something in the afternoon before or first thing in the morning before they go to print. So and the same thing, you don't want to send something at 4:30 in the afternoon to a TV station that has a 5 o'clock newscast, because obviously they're not going to fit that into their newscast that evening, and it's going to get lost by the time they get to it the next morning. So send it a couple hours ahead of any sort of deadline or news schedule.
Okay, well at this point I just want to give a really good big shout out to Michelle. Thanks for doing this webinar, and all of you for being here at today's webinar. Definitely also, you guys have a great weekend. We're going to stay on here a little bit longer. We just have one more person talk or had a question or a comment. Melody says, Karen, we do healthy living events at 2 libraries using doctors and nurses. We also have Women's Day of Health each year, which also has a mobile mammo unit. Great. So that's cool. Okay, I think we will go ahead and stop the recording, but again, stay on